Good morning, everyone. So, it's been a 2 weeks. It hasn't even been a rough 2 weeks, just been a 2 weeks. So, you kind of always need that moment to be like, okay, I gotta really set the intention right. So, go into all that chaos, come back out with clarity. So, felt really called today to talk about exposure, and exposing yourself, and just the exposure that it's, kind of like going on in this world right now. How we've always been truth seekers at heart. Humanity wants to hear truth. Even when we think we don't, we really, really get pissed when someone lies, or we feel betrayed. We've got all of this attachment to truth. And in that, the exposure of what's happening with the world around us, or the exposure of what happens with our political figures, or the exposure that happens, within the content that we collect. And I want to really bring a lot of light to focusing on the exposure of you. And really being willing to go there and find out where you don't want to be exposed. Where is it that you are resisting living your life, doing what you're called to do, becoming who you really are, because of the fear of exposure? And really bring to light what that feels like. And, as I sit in the feeling of exposure and really kind of feel into what it feels like, it reminds me of this is gonna seem so weird, but leaders, if you wanna step out, then you gotta lead, right, with what you're calling into others. So what I'm calling is the vulnerability of exposure. And it reminds me of the first time when you have sex or lose your virginity. And it's like that feeling of not wanting the lights on, that feeling of not wanting to maybe even get fully undressed, that feeling of letting your body be seen as it is, that feeling of thinking that something might be wrong with my body, something might be different, something might be unliked about it. And that is just what vulnerability and exposure really feels like in general. And so often we aren't paying attention to how much we hold on to not wanting to expose the self, expose the heart, expose our wrongs, or anything that we've judged of ourselves in our life that we have done that we believe is wrong or incorrect, or has hurt someone else. There's a lot in there, and we've all done it. I mean, we've all felt that shame. And really being willing to go back into it, own it, and step out of that shame and into that exposure, into that vulnerability, into that leadership, because it's the only way to lead, is by the example of it. And by the example of anything, really. If you're going to call on people to make money, you better be making it. If you're going to call on people to spend money, you better be willing to spend it yourself. If you're going to call on people to be vulnerable, you better be willing to be vulnerable. And really just stepping into the discomfort of that. Which, that reminds me also of speaking to my kids this last week, because with the homeschooling, which we do anyway, but all of their friends being out of school, then it offered them more time during the day, which meant less work. And so it was on the catching up of it that they really resisted doing the work, and the work was too hard. I can't do it. It's difficult. I'm struggling, and all of this kind of stuff. And I had to really get them present to the work is never hard. The work is never, ever, never hard. Like, that language has to change. The feelings are uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable as fuck sometimes, but the work is never hard. And to really get into the proof of that, it was like, all right, what's 3 + 8? Like, your 7-year-old brother is working on those facts, and yet they come easy to you. But when you were in the middle of them, they weren't so easy. Just like now, when you're doing your fractions and you're trying to, factor numbers and all of this kind of stuff, like, the work doesn't feel easy. But next year, you're going to look back on it and go, man, I wish I had that work again because that was easier work. So growth is always going to stem from that discomfort. And it's just about our willingness to be in it and feel it and experience it. Be okay with it. Get into the chaos, reset it, and step into who you are. So in this last 2 weeks of while things have been quiet, then there has been so much foundation being set in a collaborative way with some other women that I'm really excited to introduce to you soon. And also I, am kind of saying, okay, hey men, who's ready? Who's ready to step out? Because there's some really cool collaborating going on that is going to be directing, there to help guide people through their own exposure to themselves, thus the exposure out in the world, and then really setting up leadership beyond that. So if you're interested, then go ahead and comment on the bottom of this video. And if there's any walking through the exposure... Wow. If there's any walking through the exposure of yourself that you're having trouble with or anything like that, then reach out, because it's not as hard as we tend to make ourselves believe that it is. So I love you guys. I hope that you have had a wonderful 2 weeks as best you can. And I really send out thought and prayer for anyone who is experiencing difficulty, as well as send out so much love that you continue to make the best of your current circumstances and experiences. I know that this feels hard, and I know that we will get through it. I love you guys. Mwah.